guys the necessity of the mask, so I'm going to try to be loud. If you guys at any point can't hear me, you know, there are some particularly vocal people in this group, at least from Tefereth, so you know how to get a hold of me, okay? But I will do my best. In the words of Ecclesiastes, a season is set for everything. A time for every experience under heaven. A time for dancing and a time for wailing. A time for birthing and a time for dying. A time for speaking and a time for silence. A time for seeking and a time for losing. The time of mourning is a complicated time filled with many emotions and memories, both bitter and sweet. We will begin our service with a recitation of psalms and prayers, thus linking Charlotte's life with the 3,000-year-old tradition of the people Israel and the eternity of God. Psalm 23. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, binot deshe yabitzeni, al mei menuchot yenahaleni. Nafshi yeshovev, nafshi yeshovev, yancheni v'maglei tzedek, leman shemo. Gam ki elech begeitz al mavet, lo irara, ki ata imadi, shivtecha, umishantecha, shivtecha, umishantecha, hema yenachamuni, taroch lefanai shulchan, taroch lefanai shulchan, taroch lefanai shulchan, neged zorerai, dishanta vashemen roshi, dishanta vashemen roshi, dishanta vashemen roshi, kosi revaya, ach tov achesed, yidefuni, kol yemei chayai, veshavti beveit Adonai, veshavti beveit Adonai, leorech yamim. A Psalm of David. Please join me in English. It's inside your packet. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me to lie down in green pastures. God leads me beside the still waters. God restores my soul. He guides me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou prepare a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Because Charlotte was a special lady, I thought I would do Eshet Chayil. Eshet Chayil mimsa v'rachok mipnimi michra batach balev bala v'shala lo yechsar Gemal tu tov v'lo ra kol yemei chayeha darshat zemer ufishtim v'ta'as v'chapet chapeha Haytachani yotzochem mimerchach tavi lachma v'tachom b'od laila Batiten teref levete v'chokonortecha zamem asadeh v'tichacheu mipricha pehanata karem Hogra ba'oz motneha, v'tam etzoroteha, tamakito sachra, lo yichbe b'layla nera yadeha shilcha b'kishor, v'chapeha tam gufalech, kapa parsa la'oni, ve'yadeha shilcha la'evyon otira leveta mishalek, kicho beta lavushanim, marvadi mastala, Sheish v'agaman levusha, noda b'sharim bala, b'shiv to'im ziknei aret sadina savatim kor, v'chagor natna laknani, o zehada levusha, v'tischach leyom acharon, piha potcha b'chochma, b'torat chesed alishonat Sophia halichot beta, v'lechem atzudot ochel, kamu v'neha v'yashruha, Bala halala rot rabot banot asuchayil ve'at alit al kulana sheker hachem. You can do it with me. Ve'hevel hayofi Isha yirat Adonai ititala penula mi priya deha bihaleluha bashari ma'aseha. A woman of strength, who can find? Beyond pearls is her value. Her husband's heart trusts in her. Gain shall not be lacking for him. She does him only good, no harm, all the days of her life. She seeks out wool and flax and works willingly with her hands. She is like the merchant ships. From afar she brings her food. She rises while it is yet night and gives food to her household, a portion to her maids. She considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hands she plants a vineyard. She girds with might her loins and strengthens her arms. She senses her wares are good. Her lamp does not go out at night. Her hands she extends the distaff, and her palms grasp the spindle. Her palms she opens to the poor. Her hands she extends to the needy. She has no fear for her household from the snow, for all her household are clothes and finery. Coverings she makes herself. Fine linen and purple are her garb. Her husband is known at the gates while he sits with the elders of the land. A sheet she makes and sells. A sash she supplies to the merchant. Strength and dignity are her garb, as she laughs at future days. Her mouth she opens in wisdom. A lesson in kindness is on her tongue. She watches the conduct of her household. The bread of sloth she never eats. Her children rise up to make her happy. Her husband praises her. Many women have excelled, but you surpass them all. Grace is deceitful, beauty illusory. A woman who fears God, she shall be praised. Give her credit for the fruit of her labors. May her deeds always praise her at the gates. I wasn't sure if it was going to rain, so I brought a thick plastic. But it looks like the sun is actually going to come out. Oh. There is a story in Pirkei Avot, the Ethics of Our Fathers, in which Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai asked, what is a good way for a person to live their life? One of his students answered, to have an ayin tova, a good eye. Another said to be a chaver tov, a good friend. And a third, Rabbi Elazar, replied, to have a lev tov, a good heart. Rabbi Yochanan then said, I prefer Rabbi Elazar's answer, for those who have a lev tov, a good heart, also possess all the other qualities. Charlotte Raush had an ayin tova, a good eye, for she was often able to look at life and people and see the good, even though sometimes her life and physical circumstances made it difficult to do that. Charlotte was a chavera tova, a good neighbor and a good friend. She was fun to be with, as many of you know. She had a great sense of humor and a cheerful way about her. But above all, Charlotte Raush had a good heart. She was warm, sincere, loving, and generous to her family and friends, and she was devoted to so many, including her support of the Jewish community of Des Moines. Charlotte was born on December 8, 1934, the daughter of Harold and Ella Jacobson, and had two older sisters, Mildred and Shirley. Both of Charlotte's parents were European immigrants who came to settle in Des Moines, and Charlotte's father owned a candy business. Charlotte was a bright child, and education was important to her, not just for herself, but for her family. As a girl, though, her parents didn't necessarily see cheder or a Jewish education as important for their daughters. It was out of Charlotte's desire and initiative that she was able to receive a Jewish education. She would then go on to graduate as valedictorian from Roosevelt High School and earn her bachelor's and master's degree from the University of Iowa in psychology. It was a very distinguished department, and few women in Charlotte's era were accepted into the program. It was while she was studying at Iowa that she met the love of her life, Melvin Raush. Melvin had grown up in Brooklyn, but was at the Iowa International Writers Program, another prestigious program. A high school friend of Melvin's, Julian Smith, was in Charlotte's department, and they were all active in Hillel, while Melvin and Charlotte would later become house parents. Charlotte asked Julian to introduce her to Melvin, and the rest was history. The family matchmaking connection continued as Julian's daughter Sonia introduced Charlotte's daughter and her husband Joel. Melvin and Charlotte settled back in Charlotte's hometown of Des Moines, where Melvin worked for a long time at Charlotte's family's candy business, along with his brother-in-law Milton Ohringer. Melvin and Charlotte had a good marriage, a warm, cooperative relationship, and they loved each other very much. The couple had 3 children, first Sarah, then Neil, and finally David. Charlotte was a devoted mother, nurturing, especially when her children were ill and needed extra support. It was very important to Charlotte to raise mensches, and she put a lot of energy into making sure that her children had good values. David remembered the picnics she would take him on with his very own lunchbox when he was very young and didn't need one yet because he wasn't in school. And while Sarah and Neil were at school, they were sweet memories. One time, though, he unnecessarily killed an ant. Charlotte taught him some morality then. If the ant had made it into their home, that was one thing. But since it was just outside minding its own business, it should be left alone. Charlotte was very honest and lived by her values. Integrity was important to her. For example, if someone in a store accidentally gave her the wrong change, even if it was only a few pennies, though she might already be in the car, she would go back in and make sure that she got the right change. This was important for Charlotte to have her children see this example and for it to be instilled in them. Charlotte would pay attention to staff at restaurants and grocery stores and developed friendships with them. Charlotte's children's education was important to her as well. She played games with them which had educational components, like cribbage, which works with math skills. Charlotte would walk her children to school and then check in with the principal to see how they were progressing. She may have put some pressure on her children to succeed academically, but she knew her children were up to the challenge. Charlotte was a loving grandmother, even as it was long distance, since she wasn't really able to travel and didn't really like it. But she enjoyed her granddaughters, Melanie and Rebecca, when they came to visit, and even though technology was not her thing at all, as we all know, she bought a webcam for David's family so that she could interact with them in that way. She loved them, she enjoyed hearing from them, and she would talk about how special they were to her friends, including me, and she would advocate for them. Charlotte, as attested by all the people here, this is the biggest COVID funeral I've had, by far. Charlotte was a Chavara Tova. She was a very good friend. And she showed her good heart, her Lev Tov, through the love she had for her family and her many deep and long-lasting friendships. Charlotte was particularly close to her sister Shirley, who while she was alive lived only a few blocks away. They talked all the time, and the two families spent most holiday meals together. Charlotte would also invite students who didn't have a place for the holidays, either from the Osteopathic College, now known as Des Moines University, or from Drake University, to come for holiday meals. Many of those guests would return year after year, a tribute to Charlotte's warm and welcoming spirit. Her love for Shirley and her family grew as Shirley's family grew, especially when Charlotte's nephew returned to Des Moines with his family. Charlotte loved spending time with Sheldon, Beth, and their children Kylie, Jack, Allison, and Lexi. Charlotte worked flexibly when her children were young, and then more as they grew up. And then after they left the house, Charlotte worked first at the family candy company, and then in real estate for a while, then running a bookstore with Melvin, another small used bookstore with Rabbi Berg's wife Shirley, and eventually worked for many years as an accounting clerk for the Department of Revenue and Finance for the state of Iowa. She met and made many friends over the years, many through working, including her buddy Donald Savage. When Melvin passed away suddenly in 1996, Charlotte was devastated and grieved the loss of him still, even until she died. But after Melvin died, her social circle also expanded, and she had so much support here in Des Moines from her family, her good friends who were like family, some of whom adopted her into their family. Charlotte enjoyed going out to eat, something I was fortunate to do with her, and we shared some of those stones, which were chocolate stones, that she wasn't really supposed to have at the Hibachi Grill in West Des Moines, one of the places that she enjoyed going to. She made sure I got a lot extra, more than I would ever take. And then I said, I don't need all this. And she said, I know. And then she got a couple for herself. Neil shared that a few years ago, when Charlotte was more mobile, he visited for her birthday. And she had an extensive restaurant itinerary plan. Neil also likes to eat out. And they went to 2 different restaurants every day for 5 days. Often with a few of Charlotte's friends, but different friends at different meals. She was impossible to get a hold of during that time. Charlotte, I'm saving the best for last, was also famous for, what have I not said yet?
Dirty jokes.
Yes! For her jokes. Dirty or off color, of course. But as Sheldon reminded me yesterday, the dirty could also refer to someone falling in the mud, right? It didn't have to be a dirty joke in that way. I can tell you, and I know you know, the twinkle in her eye when she would tell one of those jokes was cute and beautiful at the same time. And I know that I am not alone in missing that about her. I tried to find a Charlotte-style joke to slide in here, but I just couldn't find the right one. I will leave it to her granddaughters to sell some of her best, which I will read shortly. Charlotte was kind and generous to those she loved and to the Jewish community of Des Moines, to which she was also devoted. Charlotte grew up at Tifereth Israel Synagogue, and she and Melvin continued their membership until today. All 3 of Charlotte and Melvin's children had their B'nai Mitzvah at Tifereth, and the family were regulars along with Shirley's family at Shabbat Mincha with Cantor Spiro and Rabbi Citron. At some point, the family also became members at Beth El Jacob and would go back and forth between the 2 shuls, especially on the holidays. The family became close with Rabbi Berg and his wife Shirley, and Charlotte and Shirley were good friends. After Melvin's death, Charlotte was on the Beth El Jacob Board of Trustees and very active in both synagogue sisterhoods. She was a longtime member of the community Chevra Kadisha as well. For many years, especially when she was more mobile, she was very active in Minyanim at Bethel, especially for all of her family members' yard sites. As long as she was mobile, and even towards the end having Donald drive her, she never missed a Yizkor service at Tifereth. I will also remember she was my first stop. She made sure of it. At the community annual Kever Avot service, where I would chant Kel Malei Rachamim for all of her beloved relatives. This past year, because I knew the terrain was too much, I called her ahead of time to make sure that I had all of her loved ones' Hebrew names. It took 3 voicemail messages from Charlotte to tell me all of them on my office phone, but I still have them written down at my desk. My only living grandmother, I should tell you, is also named Charlotte, and they share some similarities. So it was sweet for me to get to know our Charlotte. I have not been in this community for many years, but I know that I am not alone in remembering with such fondness the love, care, and wonderful sense of humor she shared with me, and I will miss her very much. She truly had an ayin tov, a good eye, was a chavara tova, a good friend, and was above all a good heart, Lev Tov. There is another line from Pirkei Avot a little later on after the one I quoted earlier that Charlotte often used to quote. There are 3 crowns, the crown of Torah, the crown of priesthood, and the crown of royalty. However, the crown of a good name is superior to them all. Charlotte Raush wore the crown of a good name. It was a crown studded with many jewels, the jewel of wisdom, the jewel of deep love for friends and family, the jewel of a devotion to Judaism, and above all, the jewel of a good heart, all of which contributed to her good name, which will live on after her. May everyone who knew her and cared for her remember her fondly whenever possible, and may we, in the words of Eshet Chayil, give her credit for the fruit of her labors, and may her deeds always praise her at the gates. Yehi Zichra Baruch. May Charlotte's memory always be a blessing, and may God comfort her children Sarah and her husband Joel, Neil, and David and his wife Helene, her grandchildren Melanie and Rebecca, her nephew Sheldon, his wife Beth, and their children Kylie, Jack, Allison, and Lexi, her many special friends, and all who knew and loved her. I'm now going to ask David to come up and speak.
To quote Neil, Mom was a force of nature. We can see evidence of this force in the academic accomplishments of her youth, earning a master's degree from a very distinguished program where few women had gone before. In later years, we can see evidence of this force in strongly principled stands she took on the Bethel Jacob Ford and in other settings. Her force rallied her back from a severe infection several years ago, and I half expected the force to restore her this time also. Her now extinguished force continues to be felt in the strength of her connections with all of us here and online who loved her. Parenting is a profoundly difficult task. I am forever grateful for these, among other gifts, that Mom and Dad gave the 3 of us. I hope and I pray that Helene and I are providing the same for our children. Mom and Dad gave us a stable home where their love for us was always felt. They supported our learning from before we even began school through completion of our chosen courses of education. They taught us values and how to live by those values in their words and by their examples. With all my heart, thank you, Mom.
Very nice. Very nice. Barb, do you want to come speak?
Can everybody hear me, or I'll take the mask down a little bit?
We can always hear you.
Just be loud, Barb.
Okay. Several years ago, Charlotte had a fear. She said, nobody's going to speak for me. You have to promise to speak for me. So I thought, I've never done this. So the first thing that popped in my mind was the words to the song from the Golden Girls. Thank you for being a friend. So I can't sing it, I'm not that good of a singer, but I've taken those words and tweaked them to personalize them for me. And as you may know, Charlotte and I lost our husbands within 6 months of each other. So for the last 24 years we've been each other's pal, confidant, best friend, and nurturer. So these are the words that I would like to kind of say about her, the way I feel about her. Thank you for being my friend. We've traveled down the road and back again. Your heart is true. You're a pal and a confidant. I'm very proud to say our friendship has endured for over 5 decades. My hat is off. I wish you could take a bow. And if we threw a party and invited everyone you knew, you would see the biggest gift would be from me. And the card attached would say, thank you for being my best friend. And as we've both grown older, with aches and pains and hair of gray, have no fear, even though it gets harder to hear, I will stand here close to you and say, thank you for being my best friend. And after all the tears we've shed, and for all the laughs and secrets we've shared, we were always there for each other. And that's why there'll never be another one like you. Thank you for being my best friend.
Thank you, Barb. So now I thought I would share some words at the request of the family from Rabbi Ari Sittner, who is the rabbi here many years ago, who wrote a eulogy at Charlotte's request for her that was in all of her arrangements. And it's another facet of her, especially her relationship to Bethel Jacob. Jewish tradition teaches us that one of the greatest people to ever live was Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses. Of all the great miracles that God performed through Moses, of all the amazing accomplishments that he did, despite his being the greatest prophet to ever live, it is fascinating to see how the Torah declares his eternal legacy. V'ha'ish Moshe anav mikol adam. And the man Moses was the most humble of any man. But of all of Moses' great accomplishments, why is his humility pointed out above all else? The answer is because when a person walks through life humbled before God, only then do they have the ability to live for other people. Humility is a single quality that can lead a person to all other mitzvot, and thus it is held in the highest regard above all other traits. Therefore I, Rabbi Ari, would like to state about our dear Charlotte, V'ha'isha Charlotte, anava mikol adam. And the woman, Charlotte, was the most humble of all women. Charlotte was a person that always put others first. She had a heart that was sensitive, a hand that would love to give, and a neshama which cared for others more than herself. How many of us remember the phone calls that would start off with the words, "Hi, it's just me, Charlotte." This is the true trait of humility. She never saw any of the chesed or the mitzvot that she did as being anything special, even though it truly was. Rather, she would always say, "I am just doing my part." I will never forget seeing Charlotte's smiling face sitting as she sat daily in shul waiting for minyan to start, counting each man walking in the door. Some people would say to her, "It's a shame that the women aren't counted in the minyan," but that never bothered Charlotte, because friends, I can tell you that Charlotte was the minyan. If not for her, Bethel Jacob would have lost its minyan years earlier. She had a strong commitment to God and to her family, and unfortunately, when the time came to say Kaddish for a loved one, not only did she come every day for the entire year, but she called people every single day to make sure that there was a minyan. As a result, Charlotte became a pillar in the community, and in her own humble and quiet way, she sustained the minyan for years. This is not to dare imply that Charlotte was a meek or quiet gal. She had a way with people, and she used that way to convince people to join the minyan, and it worked. Some might call it Jewish guilt, but I think it was her caring nature. How could anyone say no to Charlotte? She was someone who would do anything for anybody else, and we all knew it. Charlotte was very people-oriented. She understood others. She was able to look into their hearts and see their souls. She understood what made a person happy or sad, and she always dealt sensitively with others. She was able to use that talent to touch other people and motivate or encourage them in their times of trouble. You would never find Charlotte gossiping or speaking lashon hara. She was too kind to others to smear their reputation. She had a solid set of core values that she believed in and lived by. These are values given to her by her parents and passed on to her children. If she saw a person that was sick or missed dominion, she would call them. She would offer to take them to the doctor. She genuinely cared. This was a true reflection of her humility, putting everyone else first. Her children were her world. She would do anything for her kids. Charlotte Raush was a true example of the Jewish mother, but not only to her children, to her community as well. Her life with dear Melvin was everything to her, her first, last, and only love. Charlotte was a romantic, a woman who loved to love and loved to be loved. And I only hope that she knew just how much we all loved her. Just as she lived her life remembering others that have passed on, we too, her community and her family, will remember her. Through saying Kaddish for her and going to shul, we will live the legacy that Charlotte Raush leaves behind. A legacy of caring and loving, a legacy of humility and sensitivity, a legacy like that of Moses himself, one that will be remembered forever as she will be eternally missed. Tehei nishmasa tzurah b'tzurah ha'chaim. May the soul of Charlotte Raush be bound in the bonds of life for eternity. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. Now I have letters from both Rebecca and Melanie, Charlotte's granddaughters. And then I'm going to have Sheldon say a few words afterwards. This is from, which one do I want to do first? I think I'll end with some jokes. So we'll start with Melanie. Grandma Charlotte was one of the goofiest and quirkiest people that I know, in the best way possible. She was the biggest joke and riddle enthusiast, and she had new ones to share almost every time I talked to her. Some were funnier than others for sure, but they still made me smile nonetheless. She also loved any kind of brain teaser or puzzle, and when my sister and I were young, she'd send us big boxes of them for Hanukkah every year. We tried to solve them with her whenever we visited her or she visited us, and she was probably better at them than we ever were. As smart as she was when it came to puzzles and riddles, though, she was notoriously terrible with any kind of technology. My sister and I have tried to teach Grandma Charlotte everything from the earliest versions of Skype to her flip phone to her off-brand Kindle and everything in between. I don't think she fully understands how to use any of them, but she figured out technology enough to video call us and to send my sister and me bunk notes every summer while we were away at sleepaway camp. She always put in the effort to do what she could to support my sister and me. When I was in second grade or so, we read the book Flat Stanley, which, if I recall correctly, was about a boy who somehow ended up being flattened and then was sent around the world through the mail. We each made our own Flat Stanleys and had to send it to someone who would take a certain amount of pictures with it in different places. I sent mine to Grandma Charlotte in Iowa, and she really did take it around with her everywhere she went. The only thing I remember about the photos that she sent back to me is that one of them was taken at the Iowa State Fair, but they're probably still in my house somewhere. Grandma Charlotte is the reason I know that there are no non-stop flights between Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Des Moines, Iowa. She's the reason I have been to so many U.S. cities but haven't seen much of them beyond the airports. And she's the reason that whenever my friend Nicole says, "Zoom, zoom," while she's driving, I say, "You sound like my grandma," because Grandma Charlotte is the only other person I've ever heard say that. I'm grateful that Grandma Charlotte got to see my bat mitzvah, my sister's bat mitzvah, my high school graduation, and even my sister's high school graduation just a couple weeks ago. Though of course I wish she could be here to see my college graduation next year and everything that is to come in the future for both my sister and me. I love you and miss you, Grandma Charlotte. And this is from Rebecca. I would often tell my friends stories about Grandma Charlotte, now infamously known as my Iowa grandma. Yet I am hardly able to speak about her knowing that she is gone. Please bear with me as I try. My favorite story to tell would be as my friends complained that their grandparents voted for Trump or embarrassed them by making a racist comment. I would chuckle lightly as I bragged that my Grandma Charlotte's doctors told her to stop watching the news because President Trump upset her so much. I am proud to say that I have inherited her morals, her empathy, and her stubbornness. I am pretty sure we were watching the news as she told me this. Grandma, every time I stand up for what I believe in, I will remember you. I learned a lot about loyalty and dedication from Grandma. Not many women from her generation went to college. She did. It is from her influence that I too work hard to get good grades, and I am attending college in the fall. Grandma was loyal to her family, friends, and her home. I never knew my grandfather, but Grandma would always speak lovingly of him even over a decade after his passing. I hope to find love like that one day. Much to everyone's chagrin, Grandma refused to ever move away from Iowa. Although I wish I could have seen her in person more, I now understand how important it was for her to be near all of her friends and be in a place she knew. Grandma, every time I get to hug and laugh with my friends, I will remember you. Everyone that knew my grandma knew how much she loved to tell jokes. At a young age, I would read magazines hungrily for jokes to tell her the next time we were on the phone together. It would not be a phone call with Grandma if it did not start with a riddle and then me boasting that I got it right. Grandma loved jokes, and more importantly, she never wanted to keep the joy they gave her to herself. She mailed jokes for me to share with my friends at camp, and when my uncle got sick, she sent him jokes so that he would not feel too sad. Grandma, every time I make someone else smile or laugh, I will remember you. I think Grandma would have wanted me to tell some jokes at her funeral, so here are some highlights. What do you call a cow with no legs? Ground beef. What stays in a corner but still travels the world? Come on, people. A stamp. Yeah. I was going to say, I'm sure some of you have probably heard some of these before from Charlotte. When do you stop on green but go on red? When you are eating a watermelon. I miss you, Grandma. I think of you when I hold my favorite baby doll that you gave me. I think of you when I see one of those creepy talking dolls that you loved and had so many of. And when I see balloons like the smiley face ones you gave us at the airport when we came to visit. I think of you when I eat corn that you taught me how to shuck. I love you, Grandma, and wherever you are, I hope that you are happy and proud. And now I'll have Sheldon come up, her nephew, and offer a few words.
I grew up 4 blocks from Charlotte. Can you hear me back there?
Loud.
I grew up
Yes, that's
about 4
great.
blocks from Charlotte, our family did, and her family. I am 3 years older than Sarah, who is 3 years older than me, who is 3 years older than David. I spent a lot of my early youth with them. As a family, all of our Jewish, secular, and all our family birthdays were spent together. When we moved back to Des Moines 15 years ago, Charlotte got to know my 3 younger children, then 2, 4, and 6. Now, almost 17, 19, and 21. And of course, she already knew my older son as well. Our youngest daughter, Lexi, is cut from the same cloth as Charlotte and my mom. We had a tremendous time together, going to movies, eating ice cream with Charlotte and Donald, and those are some of the best memories she's ever had. Lexi planned out our last family visit to the sidewalk near the Jewish Life Center. I know Barb and Aaron and probably others did that as well. near the Jewish Life Center just a few weeks ago. So we could see and talk to Charlotte from the terrace. She was on the terrace from the side. Beth loved that she had just gotten a hat. She wore a hat, a big pink hat, that Barb had given to her. And she looked tremendous in this hat. She was in a wheelchair, but she had been wheeled out there on the terrace. Beth loved that hat that Barb Beckerman had recently given her. There are so many memories that will last forever, but sitting by Charlotte and Melvin, going out to local Chinese restaurants back in the day, if I could sit on their side, I could eat chicken without my dad seeing it. Where everyone else was kind of required to eat vegetarian or fish dishes. That was very significant to me. Always. We all heard that Charlotte liked dirty jokes from time to time, but I never really heard one, a real dirty one. I think she always thought I was too young. She loved dogs, as you've heard. That didn't come up. I had to prepare this and that. She loved dogs. Loved dogs. She even visited our three-legged dog that had visited her many times when she was recovering from the back spinal condition, and she was in this nursing home that was 24-hour-a-day IV packs. That dog visited her and other people in that center many times. It was near where we lived. But she actually came over to our house, and Donald drove her on that dog's last day to make a visit to that dog the day before we had to take that dog in. Charlotte gave so much of herself. She outlived her two older sisters by, I think, 16 and 12 years respectively. She was always there. She will always be.
Does anybody else want to say anything?
I realize as we're talking that Charlotte brought to one of my children for their bar mitzvahs a book of Jewish humor, and we spent time reading it with all the kids, and we'll continue to do that with the grandkids far into the future.
I like to see Charlotte, she always sought out someone that's downtrodden, whether it's Jewish or not. And all the many dinners we had at our shul, she would say who's sitting by themselves. She wanted to befriend them. She always wanted to befriend people. She didn't want anyone to be lonely and be part of the group.
She had a mechanical dog you almost thought was real. She told me 3 or 4 times last year, make sure it gets in her coffin. So I assumed that
Take care of.
that's good.
Okay.
She called it boychick.
She called it boy chick.
I don't know what that means in Jewish, but
Little boy, yeah, little boy.
oh.
So now is the time to, we're going to lower Charlotte down. I'm going to recite Tzeduk Adin, which is a big, long traditional Hebrew poem, while we lower her down. And then we're going to bury her ourselves. So in Jewish tradition, though I think almost everybody here is familiar with Jewish tradition in this way, but I'll review it anyway. The first shovel that we do is usually upside down, concave, because it is both the greatest act of chesed we can pay to Charlotte, because she can never pay us back, and also because it is with great regret that we have to do this and say goodbye to Charlotte officially. So, and then people traditionally do 2 more shovels, so 3 shovels total. I always tell people, I'm not the judge, upstairs is the judge, so if you forget and only do 1, nobody's going to come after you, you know. The other thing is we're going to put you always put the shovel in the dirt afterwards, and don't hand it off to someone, again, because you don't want to be seen as kind of like happily doing this, right? So leave it in the dirt if you're able. If it falls, it's okay. And we have gloves for everybody to be able to shovel easily and properly. So once we get her all the way down and we clear everything and I've said my prayer, then I'll invite the family to come up first. and shovel, and then everybody else can come. For me, it is typical, I mean, for me it's traditional, and this is what I like, to have the entire top of the casket covered before we do El Malay Rachamim and Kaddish. So you can come back as many times as you like and keep shoveling, but it needs to get totally covered on the top. Hatzor tamim po'olo ki chol derachav mishpat el emuna ve'ein avel tzadik v'yashar hu hatzor tamim b'chol po'al mi yomar lo ma tifal hashalit v'mata uvma'al memit umchaye morid sho'ol v'ya'al hatzor tamim b'chol ma'aseh mi yomar lo ma ta'aseh ha'omer v'oseh chesed chinam lanu ta'aseh ובזכות הנאקד כסה הקשיבה ועשה צריך בכל דרכיו הצור תמים ערך אפיים ומלא רחמים חמל נא וחוס נא על אבות ובנים כי לך אדון הסליחות והרחמים צריך אתה אדוני להמית ולהחיות אשר בידך פיקדון כל רוחות חלילה לך זיכרוננו למחות ויהיו נא עיניך ברחמים עלינו תכוכות כי לך אדון הרחמים והסליחות אדם אם בן שנה יהיה או 1000 שנים יהיה מה יתרון לו כלא היה יהיה ברוך דיין האמת ממית ומחיה ברוך הוא כי אמת דינו משוטט הכל בעינו ומשלם לאדם חשבונו ודינו והכל לשמו הודיה ייתנו. ידענו אדוני כי צדק משפטיך תצדק בדבריך ותזכה בשופטיך ואין להרהר אחר מידת שופטיך צדיק אתה אדוני וישר משפטיך. דיין אמת שופט צדק ואמת ברוך דיין האמת שכל משפטיו צדק ואמת. נפש כל חי בידיך צדק מעלה ימינך רחם על פליטת צאן ידיך ותאמר למלאך חרב ידיך גדול העצה רב העליליה אשר עיניך פקוחות על כל דרכי בני אדם לתת לאיש כדרכיו וכפרי מעליו להגיד כי ישר אדוני צרי ולא עוולת בו אדוני נתן ואדוני לקח יהי שמנה מבורך והוא רחום יכפר עוון ולא ישחית והרבה להשיב אפו ולא יאיר כל חמתו. So it's not a secret anymore, but I will tell you, watch out for that corner because Charlotte was at a funeral that I officiated at, so was Malka, in which the corner caved in and I fell in the grave. And it was complicated and funny and hilarious and probably one of the best workman comp stories that Grinnell Insurance has ever heard. And she used to ask me all the time how I was doing and how my back was. She definitely never forgot it. But please be careful when you shovel. Stay on this side. It's a cautionary tale, but it's an important one. All right, so I'm going to ask the family to come up first, as you are able and as you would like. And then we'll form, we have a couple of shovels and we will form 2 lines and we can keep going. And please take gloves as you go.
don't you pick him up over here? Over here. Come down that road right there.
I'm going to do El Malei Rachamim for Charlotte in both Hebrew and English, and then we're going to do a special Kaddish that is done only at burials, and it's going to sound a little bit different than what you have on the card, but only in the beginning, and then the rest of it will sound familiar to you. El Malei Rachamim shochen bamromim Hamsei menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashchina b'ma'alot kadoshim u'torim kezohar harakia mazhirim et nishmat Sheina Leah bat Yitzchak Hirsch ve'elcha shehalacha le'olama Began Eden tehei menuchata Ana bal harachamim Hasdireha b'seter kanafecha le'olamim Utzroar b'zroar chayim et nishmata Adonai hu nachalata V'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava V'nomar Amen.
Amen.
Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure to the soul of Charlotte Raush, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life, in the bond of love, and in the bond of good memories. May she always rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. Okay, Mourner's Kaddish. Like I said in the beginning, it will be a little bit different, and then you'll get to more of what you know. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rama Rama dihu atid lichichtadata rachaya mitaya ul asaka yaton l'chaye alma umivnei karta di Yerushalem ul shachlala haikala b'kava umekar palchana karata nahar advata kanana di shamaya la'atre v'yamlich kudsha berichu b'malchutei v'kareh b'chayechon uvyomechon chaye dechol beit Yisrael bagala ubizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehe shmei rahva mevarach leolam ulamei amaya Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitale v'yithalal shemei dekudasha brichu le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata da'miran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehe shlama rabba min shemaya hayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, Oseh shalom aleinu hakol Yisrael v'imru amen. May Charlotte's memory always be a blessing for all of you. And normally the traditional greeting when you leave mourners is Hamakom Yanachem Etchem B'tok Sha'ar Avalei Tzion V'Yerushalayim. May God comfort you along with all the other mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. And one of those reasons is because people have been mourning the destruction of the temple for many years, and so you are joined as mourners, as a family and as friends with all of those people, but you are also joined with all the other mourners who have lost people over the many, many years of Jewish history. And I will also say that when we translate it, we say, may God comfort you, but really the Hebrew is hamakom, it's the place. May the place comfort you. So sometimes God is comforting the people at this time, sometimes God is not comforting the people at this time. But I hope that you as a family and all of you as Charlotte's friends and everyone who knew her, that you can find a place, whether it's inside yourself or a place you liked to go with her, or a place where you became friends with her, or something like that. A place that gives you comfort in these days and weeks and months and years to come. So normally we would form 2 lines on either side of the street, and the family would walk out. With COVID, I don't want people standing too close together. So I would say to you, and I think the family wants to stay to watch, to make sure that she is guarded as she is finally buried completely. So I would say, family, you could either walk through the 2 lines, we could try to form some socially distanced ones on either side of the street, or people can just kind of say their goodbyes to you as they would like to go. It's up to you, and then you can just walk back.
However you direct, Rabbi.
All right, so what we'll do is we'll have everybody make 2 lines on either side. Stay as far apart from each other as you can. I know we kind of grouped a little bit, but do your best. And then you guys can walk down and you can shout your condolences or however you feel. And then you guys can take a walk back.